Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's have a look at the headlines. Thousands of protesters marched on South Korean Parliament in Seoul, backing the opposition's demand to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol after he imposed and then reversed martial law. NATO Chief Mark Rutte urges alliance members to give Ukraine enough weapons to change the trajectory of the war as Russian forces make gains along the front line. The United States ramps up sanctions on Iran, targeting 35 entities and vessels it said carried illicit Iranian petroleum to foreign markets. Nepal and China sign new deal on the Belt and Road Initiative as newly sworn-in Prime Minister KP Sharma Ali visits China, breaking tradition by not making New Delhi his first foreign port of call. Namibia's ruling SWAPO party declared the winner of last week's disputed election, ushering in the Southern African country's first woman president. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest on the intensifying rivalry for influence over Africa between two of the world's superpowers, the United States and China. As a part of his term's first and only visit to sub-Saharan Africa, meant to counter China, US President Joe Biden met with his Angolan counterpart, Joao Lourenco, in Luanda. Biden pledged lasting engagement on Africa's own terms. He reiterated that the United States was all in on Africa, something he also stated during a US-Africa summit in Washington in 2022. The US president also announced more than $1 billion in humanitarian assistance to Africa.
You've heard me say it before, Mr. President. The United States is all in on Africa. All in on Africa. And I think testament to that assertion I've made to you when I saw you and I've made publicly before. You've heard me say it before, but the United States is all in Angola. We've already, my administration alone, has invested over $3 billion in Angola thus far. The future of the world is here in Africa, in Angola.
The United States continues to be the world's largest provider of humanitarian aid and development assistance. And that's going to increase. You know, that's the right thing for the wealthiest nation in the world to do. And today, I'm announcing over $1 billion in new humanitarian support for Africans displaced from homes by historic droughts and food insecurity.
Joe Biden is the first US president to be visiting Angola, and he said he is very proud of the fact. The American president also toured a slavery museum in Angola and spoke about slavery being his country's original sin.
Gentlemen, as you know, I'm in the final weeks of my presidency. You don't have to clap for that. You can if you want. But I wanted to come to Angola. Although I've been chairman of the African American Subcommittee for a long time, I had never made it to Angola. Because although I don't know exactly what the future will hold, I know the future runs through Angola. Through Africa. I mean it sincerely. I'm not kidding. The partnership between Angola and the United States also extends to supporting peace and security in this region and beyond. President Lourenco, I want to thank him for his leadership in mediation and regional conflicts. I also want to thank him for Angola speaking out against Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine. It matters. It matters when leaders speak out.
The undertaking of this state visit to Angola on the eve of Angola's commemoration of 50 years of national independence will go down in the history of both countries as the first of an American president to set foot on Angolan soil. This not only buries a past part of our relationship, during which, in the context of the Cold War, we were not always aligned, but also marks an important turning point in our relationship, which will undoubtedly gain a new dynamic from today onward.
But many have questioned Biden's decision to make only one stop in his Africa tour in the oil-rich Angola, leaving out Washington's traditional allies like Kenya. The U.S. president's brief Africa visit is aimed at countering China. In Angola, Biden is showcasing a major infrastructure project. The U.S. is backing a new 1,300-kilometer-long railway project that aims to divert critical minerals away from China. The project, which is partly funded with a U.S. loan, links the resource-rich Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia to the Angolan port of Lobito on the Atlantic Ocean. The Lobito project will offer a fast and efficient route for exports to the West.
It's called the Lobito Corridor. We're building railroad lines from Angola to the port of Lobito in Zambia and the DRC, and ultimately all the way to the Atlantic, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. It'll be the first transcontinental railroad in Africa and the biggest American rail investment outside of America.
At stake are vast supplies of minerals like copper and cobalt. These minerals that are a key component in batteries and electronics are found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But competition to access resources in the region has been intensifying in recent years. And the United States' project, which is aimed at countering Chinese investments in Africa, appears feeble. This is because Chinese investments and influence have far outpaced that of the U.S. Beijing has poured billions of dollars across Africa into infrastructure projects under President Xi Jinping's prized Belt and Road Initiative. While Joe Biden made the American pitch for Africa in Angola, Chinese President Xi Jinping already had his trump card ready, and he played it just at the right time. Beijing initiated a free trade policy with 33 African countries. Under this, China will grant duty-free access to 100% of products from 33 of its African partners. The policy, which was announced by Xi Jinping at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in September, aims to improve industrial cooperation between China and its African partners. The Chinese president had also pledged to increase its support to Africa with $51 billion in funding. Additionally, China also pledged to triple the number of infrastructure projects it has in Africa. The United States has done little to advance ties with African nations. While it lost several commercial opportunities to China, the strategic and security ones were lost to Russia. Now, earlier this year, the U.S. lost a major spy base in Niger, leaving it without a military foothold in the Sahel, which has become a hotspot of Islamist terrorism. Niger, along with other West African countries, including the junta-ruled Mali and Burkina Faso, dumped the West and turned to Russia for security. While Joe Biden seems to have taken a fresh step to counter China's influence in Africa, it remains to be seen whether the next U.S. president, Donald Trump, who will be in the White House in a few weeks, would carry this forward or tear the plan apart. For more on this, we have with us Luke Anami, a journalist who is joining us live from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I just wanted
Luke,
to find
how
out,
significant is Xi Jinping's decision? Right. Let me jump right in with the questions. How significant is Xi Jinping's decision to implement a free trade policy with 33 African countries? What implications does it have for China's economic and political influence on the continent?
Thank you so much for welcoming me to this program. The first thing I think is going to be important is granting the three countries free trade will be very significant in actually countering the U.S. Influence in Africa. And likely the fact that if China goes ahead and implements what it has actually promised, then this is going to be a very, very, very good game changer because at first, AGOA, which is the U.S. flagship project in Africa, has about three sub-Saharan countries.
Yeah.
And of course, it has been very significant. But at the moment, China has not yet been able to do that. So if this decision by the Chinese president is going to be, then it's going to have serious implications in terms of trade. More Africans will want to trade with China directly compared to the previous years.
Right. So with President Biden's $1 billion humanitarian assistance and his meeting with the Angolan president, do you feel that this is a meaningful step toward regaining U.S. influence in Africa, or does it simply pale in comparison to China's long-term strategic investments?
I think, first of all, when you talk about 1 billion humanitarian assistance, he has not specified exactly that amount. What is it going to do in terms of the humanitarian? Is it going to do something on food? What about, is it health? So if you look at that and you look at the humanitarian pledges, the U.S. government has been pledging and making pledges most of the time, but it has not been able to follow up and see how much that money has actually been utilized by the countries that it has actually lent that money. So it may go in a way of influencing Africa, but China's long-term strategic investments have proven to be more critical. Looking at Chinese investments, you'll see that they have invested in infrastructure, and you can see the infrastructure is there available. You can see it. You can see the roads. You can actually see the railway construction, and it has a lot of influence. But the U.S. has so many stringent measures attached to their loans and their grants and their assistance. So at the end of the day, if you compare the two countries in terms of their influence in Africa, China seems to be quite ahead of the U.S. until the U.S. comes to terms that it needs to actually implement these projects and see that these projects are benefit the Africans. It will be very difficult for them to actually turn the tide against China.
Right. Let's go a little bit deeper there. You have mentioned that China has managed to outpace the US in building influence in Africa. In your view, what would Washington need to do differently to compete effectively with Beijing's approach?
The US needs to come out clearly in terms of the kind of assistance it offers to African countries. I'm talking about when you lend money, you must oversee the projects, make sure that the projects are actually being done. Unfortunately, the U.S. loans and grants have so many stringent measures to an extent that it takes so long for them to be implemented. Looking at Kenya, for instance, the kind of roads that China has actually been able to construct in less than 5 years, is very significant compared to what America has been giving money, but you don't see those measures. So what the U.S. government needs to do is that they need not to tie the development projects with issues like democracy, issues like stringent measures on how to utilize the loans. They need to give Africans a chance to do whatever they need to do with the money in terms of infrastructure. And that's what is missing from the U.S. government initiatives in Africa.
Right. Luke, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your analysis there.
Thank you so much, Alison.
Shifting focus to the civil war in Sudan, we have been telling you how a power struggle between two warring generals in the country has been prolonged due to the involvement of multiple foreign players. In the latest, another rather unusual country has been linked to the Sudan war. The country is Colombia, located all the way in South America. Sudan has confirmed the presence of Colombian fighters in its civil war. Last month, Sudan armed forces led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan ambushed a convoy of paramilitary rapid support forces, or the RSF, which is led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. The Sudan Army and the RSF have been locked in a civil war for over 19 months. Now, during the ambush, Sudan Army said it captured several Colombian soldiers and killed others. They also seized identity documents belonging to the Colombian mercenaries who were fighting alongside the paramilitary RSF. Colombia has taken note of the matter and has apologized to Sudan's army-backed government, not once, but twice. The Colombian Foreign Minister, Luis Gilberto Murillo, has apologized to his Sudanese counterpart, Ali Yusuf, over a phone call. The Colombian minister expressed regret over the participation of the Colombian nationals in the war alongside the RSF. He stressed on Colombia's commitment to resolving the situation and ensuring the return of its citizens. An apology also came through Colombia's ambassador to Cairo, who met with Sudan's ambassador to Egypt in Cairo on Sunday. She conveyed her country's strong shock and disapproval upon discovering the reports. Colombia has tried to assure that it will maintain good ties with Sudan. If both the nations have shared cordial ties, then why are Colombian troops fighting against the Sudan army? Reports suggest that around 300 former Colombian soldiers are involved in the Sudan war, and these soldiers are fighting in Sudan against their will, as per an investigation by Colombian online newspaper La Silvacia. These soldiers believe that they were hired to provide security for oil facilities in the United Arab Emirates. Instead, they found themselves in the midst of Sudan's brutal civil war. The company which hired them is a Colombian firm, and its founder is reportedly a former army officer. But the recruited soldiers say they are given directions by a retired Colombian army colonel, Alvaro Quijano, who lives in Dubai. Now, as per the soldiers' testimonies, they were recruited by the firm for their services in the UAE. However, they were housed in Libya before being transported across the border in Sudan via desert routes. They were then brought to fight alongside the RSF in El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur. These soldiers are calling it human trafficking and want to leave Sudan. While they were promised salaries of up to $3,400 per month, many report payment delays and a lack of support. The RSF has meanwhile not commented on the reports of Colombian troops fighting alongside them. The UAE has been repeatedly accused by the Sudan army, even by the United Nations, of providing support to the RSF. However, the Gulf nation has always denied the allegations. As per reports, the UAE is invested in the conflict in Sudan, which is resource-rich and strategically located. It sees Sudan as a gateway to expand influence in the Middle East and North Africa. And the RSF leader acts as a custodian of the UAE's interests in Sudan. Sudan, which is also an agricultural hub in Africa, ships agricultural produce to the UAE through the Red Sea. But it is not just the UAE, but multiple nations who are accused of providing support to the rival parties in Sudan. These include Russia, Libya, Iran, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. The war, which began in April last year, has killed over 20,000 so far and has created the world's largest displacement crisis. Multiple ceasefire efforts have failed, and the involvement of multiple foreign players is making achieving peace a distant dream. And from the deadly fighting, we shift our focus to some news of rapprochement. Africa's two major powerhouses, South Africa and Nigeria, are looking to ease their ties. The two nations have shared years-long rivalry that has spilled over to multiple spheres, be it economy, sports, or arts and culture. But the leaders of both nations have indicated that they want to move beyond this rift and work together. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu met with his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa on Tuesday for Nigeria-South Africa Binational Commission in Cape Town. The two leaders underscored the need to boost economic cooperation and to unlock the full potential of bilateral trade and investment. A major highlight of the Business Roundtable was the announcement of a new visa regime for Nigerians by South Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the cancellation of passport submissions during tourist visa applications for Nigerian visitors. The new visa regime grants Nigerians multiple entry visas valid for 5 years to South Africa. Meanwhile, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu urged for South Africa's support for Abuja to become a G20 member as well as a member of BRICS. South Africa assumed the G20 presidency on the 1st of December, and Nigeria wants the country's help for its aspiration to join the bloc, alongside South Africa and the African Union. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu urged South Africa to champion Africa's interests during the G20 presidency. He stressed that both countries should overcome what he calls irritants that hinder their collaboration and focus on transforming Africa's global image. He highlighted the importance of cooperation between the continent's two largest economies. The meeting in Cape Town is seen as a positive sign of thaw between Nigeria and South Africa after months of tensions. Though the rivalry between the two countries goes back to the 90s, when Nelson Mandela opposed Nigeria's military government. Nigeria's military government retaliated by boycotting the African Cup of Nations in South Africa, sparking a tit-for-tat rivalry that exists even today. Tensions still simmer ahead of football matches between both countries. There is also an economic competition between the two powerhouses, while they also compete in the fields of music and entertainment. The rivalry has also turned violent in the past, when Nigerians facing xenophobic attacks in South Africa. And the latest arena of the rift between the two nations was a beauty contest, where 23-year-old Chidima Adachina, a South African of Nigerian descent, was the center of a heated row as she entered the Miss Universe South Africa competition. However, she faced criticism and racism over her Nigerian roots, even by some politicians. She later withdrew and returned to Nigeria, where she was crowned Miss Universe Nigeria. And later she became the runner-up of the Miss Universe 2024 contest that was held in Mexico. This incident highlighted how deep the rift between the two nations on and off the pitch is. But as the two nations seek to work together and collaborate for their interests and for the interests of Africa, will the people in both the nations also move beyond the Cold War and celebrate the thaw in ties? It remains to be seen. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our story today is from Ghana, in Accra. Second-hand clothing from the West floods markets, but much of it ends up as waste, polluting beaches and waterways. But amid this sea of forgotten fashion, a new movement is taking root. The foundation is showcasing upcycled fashion made from discarded garments. Designers transform this textile waste into stylish and sustainable pieces, hence turning waste into creativity and raising awareness about the global consequences of overconsumption. Here are all the details about this bold response to Ghana's growing environmental crisis.
In Accra, Ghana's chaotic and colourful capital, the Kantamanto market is the place to be for bargain hunters. It's a scene of beautiful chaos as early risers dive into heaps of second-hand clothes, rummaging through what could be their next fashion statement. But these cast-offs are not just trendy finds waiting to be revived. They represent the final chapter in a tale of overconsumption and waste that has Africa playing host to the world's discarded wardrobe. Welcome to the fast fashion apocalypse, where what was once fresh, fashionable and flaunted on Instagram now winds up cluttering Ghana's streets, beaches and landfills.
Although second-hand clothing is not expensive, it is causing problems for us. If nobody buys them, where are they disposed at? They are not disposed of well, and they aren't even burnt, but are thrown into the coral lagoon, which then goes into the sea. This affects our work.
Cue the Owo Festival, the annual glitzy and surprisingly glamorous rebellion against this textile trash heap. The event, better known as Obroni Wawu October, which in case you're wondering translates to Dead White Man's Clothes in Akan. Designers pull together chic outfits from the very garments others have tossed away. Floral blouses, denim jeans, and even leather bags. While some might call it repurposed, the festival is much more than a chance to wear last year's rejects. It is a bold attempt to raise awareness of the relentless march of fast fashion, that insidious global force turning perfectly good clothing into landfill fodder. And sadly, Ghana's beaches are feeling the burn. Designers are not just stitching scraps together, they are out here fighting for the planet, one denim jacket at a time.
Some of these fabrics are too heavy, you can't even use it as a cover, bed sheets or something. So instead of allowing it to choke our gutters and also landing into our beaches and our landfills, I tried to use it to create something like a pant, a jacket or something, to repurpose it for us to use it again.
But while this fashionable festival is making waves, let's not sugarcoat it. Ghana has a serious textile waste crisis. Ghana is the go-to destination for second-hand clothes from around the globe. This sounds like a good deal until one realizes that almost 40% of the stuff is practically unusable. Every week, millions of garments flood the country. They make their way to the Kantamanto market, where these clothes are sold at bargain basement prices. Some of them are so ragged that vendors can't even be bothered to sell them. In fact, a whole 40% ends up as waste, but the rest of it has a second life, on beaches, in gutters, and even in the sea. This is also wreaking havoc on Ghana's infrastructure and environment. With Ghana's population booming and the city's waste system struggling to keep up, the result is, well, a lot of textile debris everywhere. Beaches, rivers, and even the famed Korle Lagoon are littered with unwanted threads. But hey, fashion is supposed to be messy, right? Enter the OR Foundation, Ghana's very own superhero fighting the war on textile waste. With initiatives like the OO Festival and upcycling workshops, the foundation is creating a buzz around fashion that doesn't come at the cost of the environment. With every piece of upcycled clothing that parades down the Obroni Wawu runway, there is a glimmer of hope. Local designers are transforming waste into wearable art, showing that even the most discarded materials have the potential for a second life. The OWO Festival might not be able to stop fast fashion altogether, but it's a start.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.